Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Tribal Research Initiatives in American Indian and Alaska Native Communities, Engaging Tribal Leadership and Community Stakeholders. My name is Susan Howley and I'm the Program Director for the Center for Victim Research. The Center is built on a partnership between researchers and practitioners at the Justice, Research and Statistics Association, the National Center for Victims of Crime, and the Urban Institute. The Center's mission is to serve as a one-stop resource for victim service providers and researchers to connect and share knowledge, to increase access to victim research and data, and to increase the utility of research and data collection to crime victim services nationwide. Today's webinar should help with both of those things as we build an evidence base for victim services. This webinar and all of the Center's activities are supported by funding from the Office for Victims of Crime, part of the Office of Justice Programs at the U.S. Department of Justice. And now I am delighted to welcome today's presenters, Pecos Melton, Rita Martinez, and DeeJay Chino from the American Indian Development Association. I'll turn it over to them and let them introduce themselves further.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, we would like to thank CDR and OVC for the invitation to provide this webinar. My name is Rita Martinez, and I am a citizen from the Pueblo of Laguna. I am also from the Pueblo of Jemez on my mother's side. I am a program manager here at American Indian Development Associates, and I've been providing support for numerous research initiatives in tribal communities over the past 15 years. And I started off as a field interviewer, moved into research coordination, and now I'm a project manager. I'm joined by DeeJay Chino, who is our field operations manager.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us.
DeeJay is a citizen of the Navajo Nation and is also from Northern Cheyenne. She is directly responsible for arranging a lot of the technical assistance that we provide to our tribal clients. And she is also involved in managing several projects that involve intimate partner violence, developing victim advocate curriculums, doing tribal needs assessments, and she's currently developing a tribal victim specialist internship program for college students. And finally, we're joined by Pecos Melton, who is our fearless leader, who will be helping to close our presentation today.
Thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to this presentation with all of you.
Ada is a citizen of the Pueblo of Jemez, and she is the president and founder of American Indian Development Associates. She brings over 30 years of experience in the design and management of culturally relevant training and technical assistance that is primarily focused on tribal justice systems. She has authored numerous project reports and articles dealing with tribal victimization and justice issues, and she has many years of research experience as well. And so today, our team would like to cover the following webinar objectives. First of all, what is research, and especially research in tribal communities? What exactly is a research stakeholder, and what are their roles in research? We would like to discuss what are some of the barriers to stakeholder engagement, and why you should get involved as a research stakeholder, and what are the benefits to being an engaged stakeholder. But first of all, just a little bit of background on AIDA. We really strive to strengthen tribal capacity through respectful, participatory, and culturally relevant and appropriate research practices. It is really important for us that we are able to share some of the experiences and the knowledge that we have learned throughout the years in conducting research in tribal communities. And we hope that you will be able to take away some information that will help you to be an engaged in tribal research and or to improve the work that you do with tribal communities. So what exactly is research? Research is a way to gather information in a systematic way. Research is extremely important because it helps tribes to problem solve, to develop programs and services, to allocate funding, and to strengthen our advocacy efforts around important issues that are impacting us on a day-to-day basis. In order for research to occur in tribal communities, it requires a tribal engagement process and often tribal leadership approval. But first, it's important to acknowledge that tribes have always engaged in research since the beginning of their own origin stories and narratives. Indigenous methodologies have been passed down from generation to generation, and they include the study and observation of our environments, the study and use of traditional medicines and plants, the study and observation of animals and their ecology, which was extremely vital to our survival. And this deep study of the place in which we live was transferred into traditional knowledge and is often used to inform culture, traditions, beliefs that help to shape our worldview and our understanding of the world in which we live. It has often been used for 7 generations planning and the development of civilizations that still exist to this day. So it's important to recognize that research is not a foreign concept to us. The systematic understanding of the world in which we live is something that we have always done and will continue to do as Native people. So today, tribes are often engaged in research to inform policy and program decisions at the local, state, and federal level. They use research to evaluate the effectiveness of programs and services. They use research to understand the needs and wants of citizens. And they're often using research to increase their knowledge of issues that are impacting the community or recent phenomena. And they also participate in national or regional research that they're being asked to do from academia or at the federal and state level. Some of the research activities that you'll see happening in tribal communities are using a variety of data collection tools such as surveys. We do a lot of focus groups, individual interviews, observations. Oftentimes we're looking at existing data, doing secondary data analysis. And we use a variety of data collection tools and methods, such as descriptive, correlational, and experimental design. Oftentimes, it's the research questions that determine the research method and the data collection tools that are being used. And tribes and tribal stakeholders are vital to determining what those research questions are. But it's important to note that there are some key differences in approaches and perspectives with regards to mainstream approaches to research and Native or Indigenous approaches to research. Oftentimes, mainstream researchers want global understanding. They're very interested in getting to the research subjects, such as the tribal citizens. They are very interested in leading and controlling the research, and they're very much interested in publicizing their findings. Mainstream researchers are often using theories that are based in the dominant culture, and they're very interested in leading to generalizable knowledge and also pursuing research that is of their own intellectual interests. Tribes, on the other hand, want research that really furthers local understanding and shows a genuine respect for participants. They really want to be informed about what's all involved with the research, and they really want research to help them identify solutions to local problems. So they're really looking at more action-based types of research. And they're also wanting to have more control over the research initiatives and activities. And a lot of what tribes want is really driven because of a legacy of poor research practices. And many tribes and many Native researchers are really demanding that we correct that legacy. Some of the poor practices include experiences with researchers that have been disrespectful of cultural protocols, research that has dismissed non-academic knowledge as valid input, research results that are not shared with tribes, or the information that is shared is oftentimes too technical to understand for the various stakeholders that are involved or the audience that should be using the research. And far too often the research has little benefit to the tribal community. But with more tribal engaged research, we will be able to change that and move from a place where tribes were merely informed and consulted about the research to a place where tribes are being empowered and in control of the research. Many of the tribal research initiatives that we are engaged in really strive to combine the both perspectives, both the mainstream perspectives as well as the native perspectives. And you can also be engaged in that process as an engaged tribal stakeholder as well. So although we're talking about stakeholders from a research perspective, a lot of the things that we're talking about today can be applied to multiple areas, especially where there's a need to collaborate to solve problems within the tribal community. So let's start by what we mean by stakeholders. Stakeholders are individuals or groups that are influenced or impacted directly or indirectly by research. Oftentimes, the internal or the external researchers, so whether the tribe's doing the research or it's being done by an external group, oftentimes the researchers have the primary responsibility to actively engage stakeholders. And it's been our experience that, and we have found that it's critical and essential factor to successful and meaningful research that the tribe can and will use. So some of the roles that stakeholders can have in research include the formation of research initiatives. Oftentimes, research happens at the grassroots level and is identified by tribal leaders and service providers that are seeing some of the research needs. Research stakeholders are very important in terms of the research approval process and guiding researchers through that process. Stakeholders are extremely important in terms of the regulation and oversight of the research and holding the researchers accountable to making sure that they're protecting the community from any harms that may come because of the research. And they're really, stakeholders are very important in terms of providing advisory information and guidance throughout the process. And then making sure that the research gets to the right people so that they can make informed decisions. So making sure that the reporting and the dissemination is appropriate to the audiences that need to have the information. Stakeholders can be grouped into these categories. We have tribal government, which is often comprised of tribal leaders, council members, administrators, service providers. And then we have tribal community members, the researchers themselves, non-tribal groups like youth groups, especially if you're doing youth kind of research, and then the research funding agencies and organizations. So stakeholders ensure that research is conducted in a way that achieves mutual interest. They make sure that researchers are protecting the community from any harms that may be caused because of the research, and they help to maximize the benefits of research, and they help to ensure the scientific validity and accuracy of the findings in a tribal context. Again, it's often the researchers who have the primary responsibility to actively engage stakeholders and to make sure that stakeholders are informed, that they are provided opportunities to be consulted and involved and collaborated with. And it's important to make sure that outreach strategies include activities that build on stakeholders' trust and support for the research. Now, DeeJay is going to talk about tribal leadership engagement and the importance of data in research.
Thank you, Rita. So why does tribal leadership need to be a part of the process? Well, tribal approval is required. Whether it is done through the Tribal Research Review Board or by a tribal council, it is a requirement. Tribes are sovereign nations and as such determine what kind of research occurs within their communities. The tribal leadership is responsible to the tribal community and has to ensure that both local and national research is done in a good way. Nowadays, tribal citizens are more aware of research protocols and are openly asking questions of researchers, and if their research has been approved by the tribe. The nationhood status of tribes explains the importance of researchers to build a government-to-government relationship, particularly for national-level research or multi-site research. And tribal approval enables the development of good research relationships with tribal programs, communities, and tribal citizens. So understanding data, having a good relationship also enables healthy discussions about the data that comes from the research. And there are several important uses for data. It can generate usable information, provide analysis of current service delivery, inform and educate, as well as demonstrate whatever unmet needs may be needed to develop specific services for the community. So why is data collection important? Data is used not only to share information, but also to validate current needs and issues. It also helps determine needs and services and resources that are also needed. This bar chart is an example of data collected on funding appropriated to IHS and other federal health expenditures from 2003 study. As you can see, Medicare gets most funding, while IHS gets the least. And that is unfortunately still true. So data is at the heart of research. The kind and quality of data collected shapes not only our understanding of problems and solutions, but it also helps build new knowledge. And whoever controls the data controls the research. When it comes down to it, it comes down to who counts and who counts. So in other words, who does the counting, what is it that they want to know, and who is counted? Is our reality really reflected? So who counts? We count. Tribes have increased their interest in controlling their own data and increasing their capacity to collect and use the data. In turn, increasing the number of skilled Native researchers that are wanting to also collect data and conduct research studies within tribal communities. So data collected in tribal communities varies by tribe, agency, and program. Many tribes may not have skilled staff or may resort to compacting programs within an administrative department or even contracting to a third party. All too often, proprietary information is not readily available as tribes may not have a data sharing agreement in place. Issues that may occur when collecting tribal data include who owns the data? Will the data be owned by the tribe or by the agency or department collecting it? What are the capacity issues? Does the tribe have the capacity to conduct analysis on data collected? What about ethical issues? Have the participants that are participating in the research, have they been properly informed? And research data has academic origins. Communities usually have not been involved in the data collection or interpretation process, which has led to the stigma and unrealistic recommendations that have been put upon some tribal communities. Research is tribe and issue specific, and because of that, because all tribes are different, the findings are rarely generalizable. So challenges that need to be overcome, including understanding and addressing stakeholder limitations and concerns, specifically those concerns stemming from previous poor research practices. The burden of research on stakeholders also needs to be taken into consideration because stakeholders are generally volunteers in the community and or they are involved in tribal council, so they have other issues that they need to attend to as well. Understanding stakeholder limitations and concerns and appropriate and respectful ways to share data across jurisdictions between researchers and tribes as participants and recipients of the data. Integrating the community also can be a challenge. balancing both the theoretical framework and the community context, involving community in both the interpretation and development of any new theories or practices that may result from data that's been collected, and create a balance using the new knowledge that has been collected, and really incorporate that into the community-based solutions. System issues that may occur include the lack of policies and protocols to direct research, in that tribes may not have the capacity to ensure that research that is collected within their community is done not only in an ethical way, but a respectful way to the community and the citizens. There also may be limited staff available to help researchers either navigate the community and or navigate the appropriate approval process. There also may be a lack of coordinated approaches and responses, which means that, the left hand may not be knowing what the right hand is doing. As well as in uninformed study targets, it is extremely important to keep in mind that all participants in all studies need to be fully informed of their rights and their responsibilities as research study participants. And they also need to have a place to address any concerns that they may have. So if they feel that they are being exploited, or if they feel like the research being conducted was not what they signed up for, they need to be able to have a place to voice those opinions and concerns. Also, differences in government structure. Tribal governments that are more westernized in their structure may be better equipped or to handle, big research studies and or conduct research of their own in their communities, whereas tribes that may be more traditional may or may not have those same advantages. Also, the lack of technology. Tribes may not have the computer data systems that are needed, or they may have minimal computerized data systems in order to conduct and or collect data and properly analyze it and store it. So now we'll go on to the community engagement strategies that Ada will go ahead and talk about.
So all of the things that Rita and DeeJay have mentioned should be mirrored in what kinds of strategies that we as researchers incorporate into the engagement process. A really important thing that we've learned from doing our own research is that research should be an educational process. An opportunity to transfer what we know as researchers to the local community is very important. And I think that those are the kinds of things that we have listed in this section are just some of the things that we've learned from trying to be an engaged group, trying to do research that is appropriate for our tribal communities, and developing some rules of engagement that can help guide not only our work and perhaps guide those of you that are currently involved in research or that are planning to do research. An important part of the engagement process is that it's very important for there to be a meaningful way to protect research rights. One of the ways is by ensuring researchers are culturally informed and culturally competent to conduct the research in the tribal community. This is an important aspect of doing research and protecting the rights of the people that are most affected. Because if you're not culturally informed or culturally competent, and that's what all of us are striving to do, then it wouldn't be fair to the recipients of the research for us to be making decisions about how the research we are conducting will affect them. So it's an important process that I think is now coming of age because tribes are using their sovereignty to demand how research is done by being able to stop research that they don't want, or if a researcher cannot demonstrate that they are culturally informed or have culturally competent people to help them with the research, then it means that we're not giving the tribe good science, and they're entitled to that. As a way to ensure that, tribes should influence the design of research, be involved in the interpretation of results and findings, and how to disseminate that information to its citizens, to its programs, to its leadership, and to others who make decisions on their behalf or influence what happens in a tribal community. Foremost, tribes should benefit from the outcomes of research. And it's important for researchers to really understand what their cultural limitations are and find ways to incorporate cultural experts into their research endeavors. One of the ways is by having American Indian, Alaska Native researchers lead the research and or be part of the research team. That's an important strategy that we're seeing more and more of nowadays. Again, this is because American Indian, Alaska Native researchers are now just coming forward and doing research either on their own or becoming part of big research projects. And large research firms, it's to their advantage to include those kinds of researchers, American Indian, Alaska Native research, to be prominent leaders of the research that's being done. Sometimes when you're just now arriving to the scene, you may not have all the resources that are necessary to conduct the research on your own. And by that I mean financial resources. Foremost, involvement of tribal leadership and the community is essential. So how do we get started? It is the researcher's responsibility to keep the researcher going. So it's going to be very important for researchers to have the patience to understand that we are competing with many interests that tribal leaders are addressing simultaneous to the research that we are trying to have happen. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to respect that these are things that are important. Everything's important. And many of us who have done research in tribal communities know that we have to sometimes hurry up and waiting for councils to get on their agendas while they address other kinds of issues that are happening in the community when we arrive to present our research and to seek our approval from them. It's important for us to be persistent in a respectful way. It is our responsibility to stay in touch, and we need to find respectful ways to do that. And we need to be upfront and transparent about what our job is in terms of persistence so that people can know why we're continuing to call them. And to find ways, here's where stakeholder involvement is really critical, because they can be our messengers for us and also be the nudgers of getting things on either on the council's agenda or the program's agenda or the community's agenda. It also is very important for us to be prepared. That's our responsibility again. Effective use of stakeholders can make a big difference in keeping the momentum of the research going. But we still need to have our elevator speeches. We have to make our presentations short, appealing, culturally informed presentations. We need to be able to tell the tribe and participants how they would benefit, either individually or as a whole. And we need to make sure that we stay on their radar. So what are some of the tools of engagement? One of the most important things is that we may need to rebuild trust. Rita and DeeJay mentioned all the time the different things that have happened to ruin the trust by poor practice in research. And so we really have to earn trustworthiness. Tribes are still very wary of cultural appropriation. By that I mean the use of elements of a minority culture by members of the dominant culture. We have instances where research that was supposed to have been done was also used, data was used for other purposes. And those kinds of things are still the kinds of things that we run into all the time. And even though we're not the ones that did it, we're still having to bend over and receive the cultural spanking for making those, for somebody else's sins. And that's just the reality of it. And any of you that are out there wanting to do research, you may face that same situation. It's really important then, in order to gain that trust and trustworthiness, to be very transparent with what kinds of tools, methods, and approaches that you're going to use. So for instance, you might really need to share the data collection instrument. You might have to have repeat sessions with community members, go to all of the 7 chapters or districts in a tribe, all the chapters in a tribal community, all the different programs that you might have to repeat and repeat and repeat so that people understand and are informed about the research process. One of the things, as I said earlier, research should be a learning and educational process for tribes. This is the way that we build capacity. Stakeholders are not trained researchers. They don't know what a privacy certificate means or why we need to have it. They don't understand what the protections of human subjects is. They don't have down the research lingo that we're used to talking. So it's important for us to use these as teachable and learnable moments. One of the most important things that we can help stakeholders do is to design research agreements, develop education materials, and learn how to engage tribal leadership. If stakeholders are engaged, then they will be able to help their local line staff and administrators be able to understand the research process and then to be able to use the results and outcomes of the research. One of the other things is that we really want them to become our research advocates. And so it's important for us to invest time in educating researchers or our stakeholders about what the research process is. And then ownership is enhanced by applying results and findings to local problems and solutions. If there's not a love connection there, then it's not unreasonable for us to not think, to be wondering why they're not using the research. That, as one of the gals indicated, we're taking the global, and there may be global benefits, but tribes are very much interested in what the local aspects of the research is going to be for them. And again, maintaining ongoing and open communications is very important. So one of the things that we've learned over time working with tribes, that it takes a huge dosage of what I call Vita-C. It's an important, and each one of these words may require following tribal protocols. So it's important to take the time to understand what collaboration means at the local tribal level. Who do we need to talk to? Who are the groups that are already formed? How can we build upon collaborations that are already working in the community? How can we help these different people with different perspectives that we're asking to come to the table to coordinate effort to, again, we're trying to build advocacy. And so it's important for us to be aware also about the protocols that may be in place for communicating with the local stakeholders. Some stakeholders may not have broad, communication, internet capabilities, broadband. And so relying on internet or email may not be the most appropriate. Well, we still communicate with some tribes using fax and the good old telephone. And so again, we have to make sure that we understand what the communication protocols are. We may have to go visit tribes numerous times so that we can provide especially if we're doing a survey, surveyors are usually, interviewers are usually the face of the research because they're the ones who people see. And so we need to make sure that the communication protocols are in place, that the people that we used to implement the research, to do the data collection, have the proper communication skills to engage with the community. Consultation we can't highlight that enough. As we noted, tribes are should have nationhood status, and we have to have those government-to-government relationships with them. Consultation is important because once we have that established, we can get the kind of information or advice that we need so that we are doing proper research for that tribal, with that tribal community. And of course, cooperation are all a benefit of doing all of the above things appropriately. And a lot of times, the repeat is important so that we can provide the clarity that is needed. Again, researchers, we're involved in what we are trying to do. We've been trained to be researchers. Our stakeholders and tribal communities are not. And so the importance of repeat and reload and repeat is very important to the process. Again, if we have people that are participating with a good dosage of Vita-C, we can be creative. We can find creative ways to address problems that might happen, ways that we might need to implement the research. We need to be able to be flexible. And finally, we need the courage to do all the things that are included in Vita-C. We need to be able to overcome some of the fears that we might have as researchers and allay some of the fears that tribes have. Some of the ways, of course, is as has been noted, is to have a good tribal point of contact and to have a local tribal advisory committee that can help to define how Vita-C can be applied in the community. And so we've learned how to do some of the engagement processes by putting in a four-step theoretical process. One is to really build relationships. It's the first principle. We need to do our homework when it comes to working with tribes. We need to learn about who they are. Creating a tribal profile is important, and having strategies to formalize that government-to-government relationship, and making sure that there are community relationships in place. We can never forget about the community. Sometimes decisions and relationships are only with the leadership, but the community needs to be included. We need to, researchers need to build knowledge and skills. We need to brainstorm with our stakeholders effective ways to educate the community. And we need to be able to leave skills behind by hiring local citizens to participate in data collection, to be the interpreters, to be local coordinators of the research, and to really identify ways to build their skills. We always hire local people and help them to get their human subject certifications. These are things that perhaps that are left behind and that they can use for other kinds of research, needs assessment, evaluation that's going on in the community. A third principle is to promote collaboration at all levels. Through collaboration, you can build support for research and use of knowledge gained in research areas and topics relevant to the tribal community, and help the tribe to find identify the ways to use the research. Finally, to promote commitment on both sides. On our side, on the research side, we want to leave knowledge and skills. We want to be able to do the kinds of things that are important to gain commitment. And we need to be grateful for the energy and express our gratefulness for the energy that a tribe invests and what local stakeholders provide and give to the research process. We need to convey that doing research in the tribal community is a privilege, not a right of researchers. And so we have to make sure that our research, that we find ways for us to help the tribes use the research. That's a commitment by the tribe itself. They have obligations to use research that they have allowed. And we can help stakeholders to hold their own tribal leadership accountable for making use of that research. Again, benefits should mirror the concerns and issues that have been presented. We really need to apply those benefits into finding money, increasing awareness and readiness for the tribe to address problems that victims face, increase services for victims, improve the quality of services, and to make better use of services that are available in the community. Stakeholder involvement should aim to enhance the research process for everyone, the tribe, participants, the researcher, the funding agency. And it's important for there to be multiple uses and to have new perspectives incorporated into the research process. This will help to allay fears, worries, or misconceptions on both sides for the researchers and the community. In particular, it will allow the researchers to make room for research and use culture as a resource instead of ignoring it or fearing it. Other things that would be very helpful is to help stakeholders, have them guide or inform research about the best ways to provide research results to the tribe and tribal community. Presentations that are culturally robust, relevant, and appropriate. Language, English words and terms that are used appropriately in presentations could be, words that could be translated into the tribal language. Time and place are other factors that we should consider, and making sure that we are using cultural methods and approaches to provide that information in ways that are not scary to the tribe, to provide positive presentations. The most important benefit is using research in multiple and varied ways that are important to the tribe. Again, these benefits mirror the concerns that tribes have had about research. Tribes should be able to use research for all the items that have been listed, for planning, policy, programs, and prioritizing the things that tribes are needing to work in. So involvement matters because it promotes the positive changes to take place in the tribal community, especially when it comes to working with and responding to the needs of crime victims of all ages and gender groups. It's important for us to be able to use and create new knowledge. Again, if we use large doses of vitamin C, we become creative. We use our research to provide the kinds of answers that are needed to develop programs and all other kinds of things. We should be able to help research recipients value the research that we are conducting. If they don't value it, they won't use it. One of the most important things is for us to be able to express what is called practice-based knowledge, which is not new, but uncovered by thoughtful and respectful ways to document the knowledge that's been gained. It's important for us to be able to have research that can be used, because if it's not used, then tribes don't value the research. They will continue to make use, they will not make use of the results, and they'll continue to apply solutions that don't fit. What's a best practice for some area may not be a good fit for ours, and so the research that's produced for, by, and with tribes is the kind of research that we're looking to promote. And it's important for tribes to have their voices be heard, and the constituents that they serve, especially those that are advocating for and on behalf of victims. And really to influence what the federal government is doing on our behalf, and to influence the kind of research that's needed in tribal communities. So in conclusion, it's important for us to engage tribal leadership and stakeholders in research. We need to gain their trust. If we have their trust, they can give us their support. If we have their support, they will make the commitment to use the research. Finally, the research that we do should reflect the voices, our voices as Indian people. The research should reflect who we are as Indian people. It should be based on our stories and our narratives. Our science should be valued and used, and our data should be ours, and we should be able to negotiate with others how to use that data that's collected on our behalf, and that we are able to use the information to address our problems and to create our own solutions. With that, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions or comments.
Hi, this is Susan. I want to let people know that we know that all participants option in chat is not working for everyone, so you can enter your questions addressed to all panelists. So while people are entering their questions in the chat box, the first question we already received is, what is the best way for an outside researcher or someone who hasn't already worked with the tribal community to get started in forming the right partnerships?
Well, we think it's important that if you're first getting started, to create a tribal profile. And by developing a tribal profile, you'll be able to identify all of the different stakeholders that need to be involved in the research. And also help you to uncover maybe some hidden stakeholders that maybe you didn't think of when you first started, but that you have identified now that you're really trying to understand the community and the community context, the resources that the community has available, and that's a really good start, I think.
Yeah, doing your own homework and educating self is really important, and the tribal profile will help to do that, because there's a lot of information that can be gotten online nowadays. Some tribes have their own websites, so you can see what kinds of things that tribes are managing and doing and putting on, sharing information that they're already sharing for themselves. And I think one of the other things that I would add to the tribal profile, once you've educated yourself, and so you got to come in knowing who you're approaching, then you're better guided to ask for some things like a tribal point of contact, or somebody that can serve as your cultural expert, somebody who can help sponsor you. Sometimes you might need to go to the program or agency that you're trying to influence or gain their support. Maybe you need to start with the line people or the administrative people, something other than the tribal council. DeeJay, you got me?
No, just to add on, it is very important to figure out who would be the best person to be a primary contact. And like Ada was saying, it may not be tribal council. You may, need to talk to the tribal administrator or the tribal chairman or governor's assistant, and they may be the best person to help direct you to figure out who would be a best contact for you and how to get started.
And yeah, I think it's important to be nice to the gatekeepers, people who answer the phones.
Absolutely.
The courtesy that you extend to them can also really open doors for you.
Thank you. All very helpful. The second question that's come in is, what are some of the greatest concerns that you have seen come up when interviewing tribal victims?
I think, and for us, we've done a lot of tribal victimization studies, both for young people, with young people, adolescent age victims, and older. And I think a lot of times it's just giving them the space to go through, because we're asking them sometimes some very difficult questions that might take them back to remembering the experience, the victimization experience that they had. And we're always very mindful to look at distress, things that might bring distress. And I think that that's something that is important, although I have to say that a lot of tribal victims are actually feel like they're being heard by, and that their experience is something that they want to share about what happened. And I think that that's one of the really important things, is to just be able to convey that their involvement in a research project, whether that be an interview process or something else, that they're given a voice in what, to be able to say what happened and what their experience was, and to just have that voice.
Oh, so that even allowing them an opportunity to participate in this research and share their perspectives can be healing, not just potentially harmful.
Right. And that the concern is that we make sure that we are recognizing any kind of distress that they might experience talking about what happened in the past or something that they might still be involved in. Domestic violence might be ongoing. Child abuse may be ongoing. And so it's important for us to be present with where they are and either in the healing process or still if they're still in the situation.
And also keep in mind that this may be the first time that they're actually sharing this information with you.
Thank you. Another question that's come in, are there any trainings, whether online or otherwise, in cultural competency that you would recommend?
Oh, that one's a come back to me question, because I think that there are a few out there. OBC has several training webinars that mostly, you know, I can't say that in quotations, I'm making my quotation marks, that it's a tribal competency as much as it is providing information that's relevant about tribal governments, tribal culture, and those kinds of things. So specifically competency, there are a few things out there that I can't think of right off the top of my head a website, but I think that OBC is one place for the TTAC website.
Yeah, they have good trainings. Also, the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center is a good place to kind of look for those kind of things as well.
There's a lot of webinars that the NIWRC and the Alaska Native Resource Center are trying to put up, and some of the things that NICWA has as far as culturally related topics, those are good places to go.
Thank you very much. We have a few more questions that we'll get to, but I'm going to go ahead and ask Jason to go ahead and launch the poll now, the exit poll, so that anyone who has to leave early has an opportunity to answer those questions. But back to the questions, we got one, DeeJay, specifically for you. Can you share a little bit more about the development of the Tribal Victim Specialist internship for college students?
Yes, absolutely. What we are doing is looking to partner with tribal programs and 2 to 4 year universities and colleges in the Four Corner area states. So New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona, to introduce students that may have not previously thought about victim services, to get them interested in victim services, and also help the program by providing them a skilled individual that is willing to learn and will also be paid by AIDA for their time. And our funding comes from OBC as well.
That's a great program. All right, another question. Someone writes, when dealing with a tight research timeline, I've utilized the method of contracting with a researcher established and trusted in the community to carry out the research on my behalf. Is that a sensible route to take, or does that have the potential to reduce trust due to an increased disconnect from the research?
I think it's a matter of how you introduce the person that you're contracting. I think that you always want to demonstrate that it's a partnership. We hire local individuals to help us implement the research. I can't say that we've actually hired another researcher to do it. We've hired interviewers to help us with the research that we've trained ourselves. We've hired local coordinators to help the research process going. And so if that's the way that if that's the question, then I think that's an important and good strategy to follow, because you need researchers and people on the ground there. Sometimes researchers are not in the same community where they're doing the research, and so having local people is essential, I think. And I think it's a good idea to be able to do that, as long as they're, you know, the researcher that has the responsibility, the ultimate responsibility, is not invisible. I think it's important to be visible and to just convey that as a partnership that you're doing with the local person.
Thank you. One of our participants shared another resource for education on cultural competency, and that was the Alliance of Tribal Coalitions to End Violence. So they're a good source for information and information about the tribal coalitions throughout the U.S. and Alaska. And they shared that website, which is www.atcev.org. We have just another minute for questions. Remember, enter your questions to all panelists so we can see them. All right, that may be it for questions and comments. Panelists, do you have any closing thoughts to share?
Do you want to put our contact information? Here's our contact information for American Indian Development Associates. If you have further questions that may come up or might be interested in finding out a little bit more about our internship that we've developed, please feel free to give us a call or send us an email or even log on to our website, and we'll be happy to talk with you. And thank you again for taking the time out of your day to be a part of this webinar.
And we had one last question coming in, and that's, I'm sure, of interest to a lot of researchers out there. Do you have any funding ideas for those who would like to do research outside of a university or college setting?
Yeah, we do. We're not a college or a university, so I think that we are, we've been able to look for and do research either directly hired directly by a tribe for different levels of research, kinds of research, evaluation, needs assessments, helping with design of their research or data collection instruments and things of that nature. I think that tribes are needing that kind of help, and so sometimes establishing that relationship with a tribe is one way to go. I think that funding agencies are becoming more and more open. The National Institute of Justice has research partnerships that they have funded. Some of them are not from universities. And I think that it's important to look for all of those different research opportunities that are out there. But a direct relationship with the tribe is one of the best ways that we find. We're always busy because tribes need people that they can trust and are willing to help them with what they want to do. And it might not be a big research project, but it's research that's needed, and it's research that's needed by the tribe. And in closing, I guess I would just say I really appreciate the time that we have gotten. We met one of the participants from Jackie Cleveland, attended our presentation at the Women Are Sacred conference, and she attended both our presentations, and she said, we have got to have this go out. And so we really thank her for inviting us to have this platform. I know it's hard sometimes for us to get the word out or to say some of the things that are dear to our hearts and minds about how research should happen in Indian communities and Alaska Native communities. And so we thank you again, Center for Victim Research, and we look forward to hearing from any and all of you that would like to talk a little bit more.
Well,
we are located in Albuquerque, and we are at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. So if you're ever in Albuquerque, just follow your nose to the red chili and the beat of the drum.
Well, thank you so much. This has been such an enlightening and delightful webinar. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise. And I want to remind people that the recording for this session will be available in a few days, and you'll be able to share it with your colleagues, and it'll live online at the Center for Victim Research website. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Ni hao da ba mo.